Time Hunter, Deus Le Volt, by Jon de Burgh Miller. Read by Terry Malloy. It was a hot summer's night in London. The sort of night when it's physically impossible to sleep. The sort of night when it can feel as if something primal inside you is doing everything it can to stop you falling into a dream, to stop you facing the twilight world between the conscious and unconscious. Honoré knew he wouldn't be sleeping much that night, but the heat would have little to do with it. Being a spiv was a trade he had perfected years ago, after his wartime injuries had healed. But change was in the air. The end of rationing was the cause of celebration for most of London, but the life of a spiv became far less lucrative. Gone were the days when bars of chocolate and boxes of bananas could be traded for a very healthy profit. It was getting to the stage where the only real money was in drugs or weapons, something Honoré really didn't want to get wrapped up in. He knew it wouldn't be long before he faced the choice between stepping over the line between legal and illegal once and for all, or finding a new trade to pay his rent and fill his days. Still, that was in the future. For now, there was just enough work around to keep him out of trouble. But it was getting harder and harder, so he had to be careful. The worry was playing on his mind more than usual that night. He finished up the deal with his supplier and handed the cash over in exchange for a few anonymous boxes wrapped in brown paper. 12 cartons of cigarettes, the extra strong kind from Eastern Europe, smuggled through in the hold of a ferry and whisked away before customs guards could get a look in. Honoré loaded the boxes into his backpack and shook hands with his client. He gave a tip of the hat and a nod of the head, the standard way to acknowledge a successful transaction. The two men walked away in deliberately opposite directions. It always paid to be cautious, although there was rarely anyone around at this time of night. It would soon be morning, however. A few eager birds were already warming their lungs up for the dawn chorus. Honoré looked at his watch. Emily should be there by now. She'd been running an errand in Aldwych, after which she was supposed to meet him on the corner of Marchmont and Bernard Street. He was in the right place, but there was no sign of his friend. Honoré sighed to himself. What kind of life was this? Even Emily was getting dragged into it now, and that wasn't fair on her. Perhaps it was time to find a new career. They had talked about setting up some kind of legitimate business together, but neither had much of an idea what trade or service they could offer that would make enough money to justify the effort. Honoré had toyed with the idea of using his special gift, the ability to see glimpses of a person's past and future just by concentrating, to become a fortune-teller. But the idea of wearing a headscarf, makeup and large earrings while spending his days staring at crystal balls held little appeal. Honoré's train of thought was broken by a loud retort that echoed around the empty streets. At first he thought it might be an explosion and pressed himself against a wall. Above him, a ball of light and electrical energy was suspended several stories high above the ground, filling the street with jumping shadows. Before he could figure out what the phenomena was, he heard an agonized cry and saw a figure fall from the ball of energy and land on the ground with a crunching thud. There was a moment's silence, and the energy ball vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Honoré looked at the body in the street, and started when it moaned gently and tried to move. He threw down his backpack and ran over to see if he could help. The figure was an elderly man with pale skin, a long white beard, and thin, wispy hair. His chest was covered by a polished metal sheet, and Honoré suddenly realized that he was wearing a medieval suit of armor. He was still breathing and murmuring, but seemed on the verge of slipping into unconsciousness. "Hold on," Honoré said. "I'll get help." "Get me out!" the man moaned. "Get me out of here!" "Take it easy. You'll be safe soon," We'll get you to a hospital." Honoré expected that his words would reassure the man, but they seemed to have the opposite effect. The man opened his eyes and stared at Honoré with a shocked look. "You should not be here! Leave me alone, infidel!" Honoré shook his head. The man was delirious, but the fiery intensity of his eyes and the clear look of recognition on his face were chilling. "I will kill you this time!" the man growled as Honoré stood up. Fighting the extreme pain he must have been suffering, the man managed to sit up, then reached out and grabbed Honoré's leg before slowly falling back to the ground. A wave of imagery assailed Honoré, his mind touching the injured man's soul and tearing out memory after memory from his life. Honoré saw a vast desert, a shining row of castle battlements standing firm through a sandstorm. He saw vast armies of soldiers on horseback, some in medieval suits of armour, and others in filthy smocks. He saw terrified women running through blood-filled streets carrying their babies, and he saw a chapel, a bright light, and a pope preaching for all of Europe to go on a glorious crusade.